Hello friends, my name is Marinés, and today I'm going to be talking about 5 books that I read this year that I haven't yet reviewed or wrapped up. I was a little bit absent from this channel this year, so I'm doing some catch up here. So yeah, let's jump into it. First up is The Beautiful Ones by Silvia Moreno-Garcia. I read this as part of my Nearby Realms book club, so in partnership with Chirp Books, I pick a science fiction or fantasy work each month to read with this book club. It's free to join, anybody can join it, but also it's really cool because Chirp discounts the audiobook for our book club pick each month, and it's a service that is without subscription, so you can just take advantage of the really discounted audiobook every month, and then we discuss the book on my Discord. At the end of the month, Chirp sends out a survey so everybody can give their feedback about what they thought about the book, and they compile all of that for us as well. I think it's a really neat format. I have been enjoying it very, very much this year, and so I picked The Beautiful Ones a couple of months ago, and I love this. I really, really love this. I typically do enjoy Silvia Moreno-Garcia's work. She is one of my favorite authors of all time now because I just enjoy all of her work, even the ones that sort of land in a 3-star range for me, because I haven't like super loved all of it, but even the ones that I don't super love, I find so incredibly interesting. And I think that she is one of the authors currently writing that does the best sort of flipping through genres and just man, the way that she kind of moves through different stories, but still has a very signature style and such an evocative writing style. The way that she invokes the senses through her writing is just really, really wonderful. And this was no exception here for me. I think when I first read it, I gave it 4 out of 5 stars, but this is one of those ones that I just have not stopped thinking about, that I think I would bump it up to 4.5 or maybe even 5 out of 5 stars, though I completely understand why it wouldn't be as highly rated for other people. So The Beautiful Ones is an adult romantasy. It is a romance. It has a splash of fantasy, and it reads like a historical fiction. So it feels very much like a blend of genres. In it, we follow our main character, Nina, who is in the big city for the season to make her debut, and things don't go as planned because Nina is telekinetic and she doesn't have full control over her powers. Meanwhile, there is a traveling sort of performer in town who is also telekinetic, and he is well known for his great command of this power. So Nina is very taken with him. This is absolutely a novel of manners. So if that sort of thing is not your jam, this will absolutely not be. This is a lot of visiting each other, dances, sitting in drawing rooms and having conversation, and a lot of angst in fancy homes. Like, that is absolutely the vibe here. Again, it reads like a historical romance. I am a person who doesn't necessarily gravitate towards morally gray sorts of characters, and if somebody is like problematic, I'm like, in a story, right? My sense of justice is super well defined. I love like lawful good characters, and yet Silvia Moreno-Garcia provided a cast of really complicated, complex characters that I either loved, completely changed my mind about, or love to hate, and I just enjoyed the crap. I think that is what makes it stick out in my head and makes me think about it so often, is that I think back to like all of the different complicated things that I felt for these characters and the way that those feelings changed throughout the novel. The main character, Nina, though, is so incredibly easy to root for. I loved her. I wanted her to get everything that she deserved. I was worried for her. I was sad for her. I was so proud of her when she stood up for herself. So the full range of emotion invested in the main character and a bunch of supporting characters that, again, were super complex. Another thing that other people might not love, but I really enjoy, and I enjoy in general in stories, is that this was like a dash of magic. It's a fantasy, but honestly, this telekinetic power is very metaphorical, and it is just like just a little dash, just a little sprinkle. We don't really hear anything else about any magic in this world or why this exists, but this magic really stands in important ways in the story because novels of manner are usually about like societal expectations and people in and out of like the in crowd of society. This magic really is just like an additional thing to sort of make that differentiation, because Nina and Hector, for different reasons, are considered on the outs of society. The telekinesis also really stands in for emotions, both of these characters' emotions and their different commands of their emotions and the emotions that they display throughout the work. So I loved it. 4.5, maybe 5 out of 5 stars maybe. And by the end of the year, it will be all the way up to 5 stars, but I have a feeling that this will be in my like top reads of the year. Okay, the next 4 books on this list I read for all of the same reason, and it was a TikTok. So there's like a filter on TikTok that like cycles through popular books on Book Talk. Mostly the game was like, which Book Talk book am I sort of thing, but I decided to let the filter pick books for me to read and rank, and it landed on a couple of these books that I had never read, so I read them for the purpose of making this TikTok. You know, all fun and games, except for I didn't like 3 of the 4 of them. So to keep it positive, let's talk about the book that I did like. And this was a surprise to me because I went into this expecting that I would hate it, and I didn't actually, and it's Normal People by Sally Rooney. Now, this is one of those books that I enjoyed, again, but I absolutely understand why others might not. The thing is that even in reading like really positive reviews, I disagree with the positive reviews and I still like this. So any sort of take on this that calls it like deep or anything along those lines, I just don't agree with. I don't think that this is particularly deep. I don't think that it has much to say at all, but I do think that it is effective. I think that it is soapy, and I think that it managed in a very straightforward and simple style to get me to invest emotions into these like messy characters. I didn't relate to this at all. There's like nothing about this that I related to either, but also it was like watching a soap opera for me. Like I just couldn't look away. I got ahead of myself again. So Normal People is an adult contemporary story about Connell and Marianne. They meet in high school, and Connell is popular and well-adjusted and everybody likes him. Marianne is not. She is not popular. She's kind of on the outs, but Connell's mom works cleaning Marianne's house, and so they meet through that connection and they end up getting really close to each other in high school and forming a romantic and sexual relationship. We fast forward and they end up both studying at Trinity College in Dublin, and things are reversed. And so Marianne kind of finds her social footing. She becomes very cool and very popular, and Connell ends up being more shy and awkward in this college setting. And they continue to sort of circle around each other through their college careers, connecting and disconnecting at certain points. This is very much a character-driven book, not a plot-driven book. The entire thing is that these two people are messy and they just keep weaving in and out of each other's lives, and is in a lot of senses like a very privileged mess. Like a lot of their problems, again, are not super relatable to me, but it still was like super juicy to read because we spend so much time with these characters. The storytelling is pretty straightforward, and it is in a style that I typically don't like. It is very linear in that it's usually like this person did this, then I did this, then we went outside, then this happened, then this happened, then this happened. Usually I don't like that style when it's partnered with like more juvenile writing, but here it worked for me because it helps get us like really ingrained with the characters. Like I felt like I was going through things with them. What a mess this whole thing was. I felt sad the entire time I was reading it, or at least like deeply in my angst and emotions, but I enjoyed it. I think that it was effective in what it did, and I would overall give this 4 out of 5 stars. I hadn't planned it this way, but let's continue moving on here from best to worst in terms of like these 5 books. So next was We Hunt the Flame by Hafsah Faizal. This is a YA fantasy that I'm going to do my best to recap here what the plot actually was. So we have our main character, Zafira, and she dresses up as a man to hunt in the forbidden sort of forest to provide for her family, and she has to do this because misogyny, I think. And then we have the crown prince, who is sort of like an assassin and enforcer in the realm because his father makes him be, and his father is very abusive towards him, and so everybody knows the reputation of both Zafira as the hunter and the crown prince as like this assassin guy. There's some blight on the land that is like getting worse, and in order to restore magic to their land, Zafira as the hunter is sent on a mission to recover a magical artifact, and Nasir is sent on the same mission by his father with an additional bonus of like killing the hunter while he's at it. Oh man, I wanted to like this. I think that of all of the books where I had heard like Book Talk hype, had high expectations for this one. I also feel like this is a YA book where I deeply felt that I was no longer the intended audience. Like I read and enjoy YA still with the knowledge that I am not the intended audience, but here I felt it. Here I really felt like, whoa, if I had read this in like 2012 or something like this. Like maybe I would have loved it a lot more, but like super adult me, 2022 me read this and it was just a little bit like trite. It was a little empty. It was a little flat. I felt that the characterizations were particularly flat. They really just had like two modes, and it was like angsty and overwrought and over dramatic, or like these really goofy side characters that were only there for like comedic relief. And it was like two extremes, nothing in the middle. It was really weird in terms of like how it set the tone of the book. I didn't like anybody in this, honestly. I didn't like anybody. I didn't like anybody at all. And that was aggravated by the fact that the story went absolutely nowhere. We get all of that set up. All of the plot synopsis that I got was like set up. And then they go off on this mission and just languish. My God, it went nowhere. It went nowhere. They were just, I honestly forgot why we were even doing anything or where we were. It went on forever. It felt like just wandering and having feelings and cracking jokes in a way that I found really, really not enjoyable. The reason that this kind of like outranks some of the other stuff on this list is that I didn't feel that the writing was that bad, and there were elements of like the plot and the world building that were better than most, or that had like a fresher air than some other things, but this was by no means like great, and it is certainly not something that I would widely recommend. I would probably give this like 2.5 out of 5 stars. In that area. Next, I read Kingdom of the Wicked by Kerri Maniscalco. This is like new adult fantasy, romantasy, and it is about, it is about two twin sisters who are secretly witches, and then one of them ends up murdered, and the other twin makes it her mission to figure out why and how her sister was murdered, and she decides she will do this at any cost, including using like dark forbidden magic, and so this makes her cross paths with one of the princes of hell. That's where both the plot and the plot synopsis end. This was the reason I'm laughing is because that this is like, I honestly don't remember much of this, but it's not even that I don't remember, it's that nothing happened, and that nothing that happened made any lick of sense. There was no cohesive storytelling here. There was absolutely no cohesive world building. This felt like the cranking of a plot machine, honestly, to get us through things with no internal logic or any sort of sense of characterization. Our main character was honestly just like leaping to these conclusions about what had happened that made, I was like, how did she just spent the entire thing like loud and wrong, running around the city. I had no sense of like what her magic was, how she could or could not use magic, why she didn't use magic sooner, like how nobody knew that magic there were so many questions. And the thing is that the character kept asking questions. Like she was just asking herself all of these questions, but she never found answers. The book never answered anything. And we just really forgot all of that setup, because the main thing that it wanted to focus on here was a sort of like enemies to lovers. The Prince of Hell is a broody white guy who's maybe not so evil after all. Flat, empty, just absolute fluff of like nothing of a novel. 1.5 out of 5 stars. I honestly, the fact that this is popular hinges, I promise you, it hinges entirely on the fact that it is a broody, bad, evil man treating people poorly, dressed in dark colors, that is described as handsome, and the girl too stupid to live who falls in love with him. That is the entire basis of this popularity. At least, I don't know what else it could be. And the worst of these 5 was It Ends With Us by Colleen Hoover. I'm going to talk about like specific plot sorts of points as vaguely as possible. Like I'm not going to like go beat for beat on this, but if you are somebody who is very sensitive to spoilers, I would skip this part. But I just want to talk about the framing of the story so that you guys can understand what really bothers me about Colleen Hoover. I mean, this entire story was garbage. It's at the bottom of my list. But this is like the fundamental thing about Colleen Hoover, or one of them, that very, very much bothers me. So this book is often talked about as an adult romance, and I would beg to differ, but the thing is that it kind of is, because she bamboozles you into considering this an adult romance, because the plot core is a romantic relationship. And it does end in a happily ever after. But the thing is that the happily ever after ends up being with a man who is a complete side character. And the romantic core actually ends up being an abusive relationship. We spend the majority of the time with this abusive relationship. I think all of the sex scenes happen between the woman and her abuser. I think there might be one sex scene, which is actually when the two other characters are minors. And so the fact that this is viewed as a romance, I think, is incredibly misleading. And I don't think that it is accidental. I think it is on purpose. I know that's reading a lot into the author's intention, but Colleen Hoover has talked about how she views content warnings as spoilers. So you very much get the sense that you're supposed to walk into this expecting a romance, and shock, it's about domestic violence. It's about an abusive relationship. The guy that you fall for and the guy who is framed as the romantic lead of this story at the very beginning actually ends up being an abuser. And by kind of tacking on this other relationship at the end and being like, oh, but happily ever after ends at the end, it allows her to kind of get away with framing it this way. This goes hand in hand with the other fundamental problem that I have with Colleen Hoover. And I say this as somebody who has read 2 Colleen Hoover books. The first one was Slammed, was the first book she ever wrote. And there's still an old review of that book up on my channel. But it was literally the same thing, which is that it glorifies an abusive relationship. It romanticizes an abusive relationship. And even though at the end of It Ends With Us, we have a clear sense that domestic abuse is bad and what this main character Lily goes through was terrible, it still romanticized the relationship. And you absolutely see that in the way that people talk about Colleen Hoover books and the way that she is consistently categorized as romance, and the way that I have seen with these very eyes, and specifically in TikTok comments, the way that people talk about Ryle as hot. The entire conversation around Ryle really reflects the fact that for the majority of this book, he is romanticized, and we kind of see that his sexual abuse, his physical abuse, his emotional abuse is like a slip, right? It is and it is also a product of his own trauma. And so it really feeds into this narrative of like people who suffer abuse are abusers, that people who have mental health problems are abusers. And just overall, all of the messaging here was really, really, really terrible. The fact that Ryle is romanticized from the beginning is absolutely wild to me, because the man is a walking red flag. The first time that we see him, he's literally throwing a tantrum. He is angrily throwing things. He manipulates his way into a relationship with this woman and gets on his knees and begs for sex after she has turned him down. Like, everything about him is disgusting, but it is not framed that way. And the fact that we sit in all of these sex scenes that are framed and are through the lens of like traditional romance sex scenes just made me incredibly uncomfortable, because this was an abuser and his victim, but the way that it all is framed is as if this was a romance, and I just felt incredibly uncomfortable with all of that. In addition to all of that, I find Colleen Hoover's writing and her plots and her situations to be incredibly overwrought. This is tragedy porn, and there are so many other details that she adds in that are just so wacky to me for like no reason. Okay, the main character's name is Lily Blossom Bloom, and Bloom Blossom, something along those lines. And she is a florist, and she just happens to open this incredibly successful florist shop. She meets Ryle, who is a neurosurgeon. Like, their friend group is like a bunch of millionaires. Lily's has a history of abuse in her family and then is in an abusive relationship herself. Ryle has a past of trauma that includes like gun violence and the death of a sibling. The other guy, Atlas, was homeless when Lily met him and also has a history of abuse. There's talk of suicide in this as well. Weirdly, so as we're like flashing back to Lily's relationship with Atlas when they were minors or whatnot, this is being told to us through like journal entries, but they can't just be like normal journal entries. Lily used to write letters to Ellen DeGeneres because she was obsessed with Ellen DeGeneres. And so she would write these letters that are like, "Dear Ellen, loved your show today. Oh, Ryle and I camped at this empty house because he's homeless." And I was like, why is this happening? And so we would just have to read these letters to Ellen, which aged terribly, but also even in like Ellen's heyday, why is this happening? On top of everything else that is happening in this story, every element is just quirky or overwrought or just like drama for no reason in a way that created a package that I just found incredibly unenjoyable. I also find Colleen Hoover's writing to be at best like fine and plain, and at worst incredibly juvenile. And it adds to the sense that her characters act and sound way younger than they are because of this juvenile sort of voice and storytelling. So there really isn't anything here that I find as like a redeeming quality. When I finished reading it, I gave it 1.5 stars. And that is because it like cleared the bar of being better than Slammed, which I gave 1 star. And again, because there is like things that make you sit in violence, I did feel something, like there were emotions there. But ultimately, I feel like those emotions I felt were caused by emotional manipulation. It never felt to me like the important thing was like viewing the domestic abuse here, but using that element in addition to all of these other elements to basically emotionally manipulate the reader. It very much felt like puppet strings, like I could see all of the ways that Colleen Hoover is like, aha, another place to like wring the emotion out of the reader. Nothing felt organic, nothing felt well written, nothing felt three-dimensional, nothing felt respectful at all to me. And so I take back my half star. And I also give this 1 out of 5 stars. I do not get the hype at all with Colleen Hoover. That's it for me today. If you have read or would like to read any of the books that I've mentioned, let's chat down in the comments. Thank you so much for watching this video, and I will see you guys soon. Say hello. Say hello to the people. You're all mangy and grangy. He needs the groomer bad. We'll go soon.